was so wrong about the suburbs. In the last year, we made 2 videos that explored some of the most messed up things people have ever seen on their home security cameras. And while those videos included some terrifying footage, when I think back on them, there were some moments that really stood out as being scarier than anything else. Those moments were the ones where the camera panned away from something just outside the frame, hinting at some kind of horrifying figure standing at the edge of sight. Because when you can see just enough of something to know that there's something there, well, that's way more terrifying than seeing the thing itself. And that's what this video is all about. Welcome to our channel. And today, we're gonna explore 3 disturbing, true suburban horror stories. Our first story is The Whispers of the Walls. It started like any normal day would for this family, living in a quiet suburb. Their kids had gone back to school after the summer holiday, and they were all looking forward to a bit of peace and quiet. But it wasn't long before they started hearing odd noises coming from the walls. At first, it was just faint whispers which they put down to the age of the house. But then, the voices began to get clearer. They were now saying full words and forming sentences. Every time they thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. The whispering voices continued late into the night, keeping them awake with frightening ease. Then they discovered a newspaper clipping from over 20 years ago, describing the death of a former resident under mysterious circumstances. The police had never released the details surrounding the death, and nobody in the neighborhood wanted to talk about it. That was until one of the children asked an elderly neighbor what had happened to the previous owner. The neighbor let out a sigh and said, "That family had some dark stuff going on. There were rumors of Satanism and strange sacrifices." But before the neighbor could say anything else, the lights went out. And when they came back on, the neighbor had vanished. Terrified, the family decided to flee. They didn't want to stick around to find out what had killed the former owner. But when they turned the key in the front door, it wouldn't open. They ran to the back of the house and threw open the French doors. But as they ran out into the street, they could have sworn they heard the whispers saying, "Don't leave us, don't leave us, don't leave us." They got into their car and sped away, leaving whatever was haunting their new home to whoever it belonged to. Our next story is Lake of Shadows. There was a beautiful lake at the edge of town. Nobody knew exactly how deep it was, but it had been there forever. Over the years, many accidents had happened on the lake. Boats would suddenly capsize and swimmers would disappear. Many locals believed the lake was cursed, but nobody listened to their warnings. That was until a group of brave teenagers decided to spend the night by the lake. They set up camp on the edge of the water and settled in for a night of storytelling. But as darkness fell, strange things began to happen. One moment they'd be laughing and joking around, and the next they'd be staring in horror at their reflections in the water. What stared back at them wasn't themselves. Instead, their reflection looked twisted and deformed, almost as if it had come from some other dimension. They tried to ignore what they'd seen, chalking it up to exhaustion and sleep deprivation. But then they started hearing screams. It sounded like someone was drowning, but there was nobody in the lake. Then one of their friends disappeared. They searched for him on the shore, but he was nowhere to be found. Moments later, his phone came floating out of the lake, still ringing. As they watched in horror, dark shadows began rising out of the water. They looked like giant tentacles reaching toward the surface. The shadows reached out for the teens and pulled them toward the lake. Only one of them was fast enough to scramble up the bank and call the police. When the cops arrived, there was no sign of the missing camper, except for his empty tent and his torn-up sleeping bag. As the sun rose, the small town woke up to the news that 6 teenagers had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind nothing but questions and theories. The local legend said that anybody who spent the night by the lake would vanish, and yet nobody seemed to heed the warning. Maybe they should have called it a night earlier, or stayed a little closer to shore. Our final story is the closet doll. She loved living in the old house. It had so much character. The rooms were spacious and filled with natural light. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of when she was younger. She paid top dollar for it because of how close it was to her work. But now she was regretting her decision. As she was unpacking boxes in the spare bedroom, she saw a wooden closet. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie, but she liked it, thinking it added character to the room. She opened the door and gasped. Inside sat an old, creepy doll. It had dirty, matted hair and a stained dress. She didn't want to touch it, so she grabbed some gloves from the kitchen and tossed it into the bin. But the next day she was making breakfast when she heard a faint giggle coming from the closet. She shrugged it off and carried on. Later that evening, she was sitting on the couch reading a book when she heard the closet door open. She slowly turned her head toward the closet and swore she saw the doll standing in the doorway. When she blinked, the closet was shut tight. She didn't want to be scared of her own imagination, so she went to the closet and opened it. The doll was lying on the floor, and she quickly shut the door again. She decided to search the house for some old boxes and discovered a set of journals. The entries were written by a young girl who lived in the house 70 years ago. Her parents had given her the doll and named it Mary. One day, she wrote that Mary had come to life and danced around the room. Then one morning, she wrote that Mary was missing and she couldn't find her anywhere. The last entry was the most heartbreaking. She wrote that her little brother had gone missing too, and she suspected Mary had taken him away. The artist cried as she read the final entry. She realized the doll wasn't just a doll. It was a gateway between worlds, and she was fighting a losing battle. If she didn't get rid of it, the doll would claim her, and everyone she loved. Now, as the screen fades to black, you hear quick, unsettling cuts from each of the 3 stories. The whispers, the shadows, the laughter. Then the narrator says, "There are some things in this world that are better left unknown. Sometimes the darkest places are right outside our front door, and sometimes the things we fear most are real, all too real."